Well, we're here at Little Creek Farm, the Nature Conservancy sustainable grazing operation today, and it's kind of in its working clothes right now. We have a lot of different partners and things that are happening here on this site. We're standing here today all because of the funding through USDA and NRCS through the Conservation Innovation Grant. As one of those pieces, we have some work that was done by MFA, and with me today is Adam Jones from MFA. And we had Adam Jones out here on site, and he took some samples both for doing some forage analysis as well as soil testing out here on this site. So Adam, you know, when we reached out to you on doing soil sampling on a particular pasture like we set now,
Sure.
What's the importance of that for a producer to actually have a soil test done?
Yeah, so when we want to look at a grazing program and something that we can do sustainably or something that we can do with as few inputs as possible, we want to be efficient with our dollars, right? So the first thing we want to look at, and not all cattle producers think this way, but at MFA we like to look at the agronomy side of things. So we want to look at our condition of our current soil condition that is in. So, you know, what's our pH across this pasture? What can we do to maximize our forage production? And then once we've got that accomplished, then we can go into looking at utilization and things like that and make sure we're utilizing that forage that we're producing all the way across the pasture. Because in this scenario, you know, I know you guys purchased this farm, and so you really don't have a background on what's going on from a soil condition thing. How beat up is it? You know, when's the last time it had a lime application, and those kind of basic things.
Yep, and I know as we do, you know, we had you guys out here, and the service that you offered that we selected was doing that grid soil sampling, and that was on 2.5 acre grids, I believe.
Yeah, that's correct.
Is what that is?
That's correct.
Now, what's that detail? What is that detail going to give me different than just going out and having 1 or 2 grab samples here at the site?
Yeah, sure. So what he's referring to, or what Kent's referring to, is that we're dividing this pasture up, and I think it's 150 some acres, into 2.5 acre blocks, and then we're taking multiple cores in each one of those 2.5 acre blocks. And what that does is kind of give us a perspective of our pH or fertility, you know, across the scale of the entire farm. And so what that allows us to do is take individual measurements at each of those points and then extrapolate them out to the farm scale. So for instance, for this farm, for sure, you know, like say our soil pH is not the same at each one of the points across the farm. And so when we look at running a lime recommendation or something to bring that pH back to neutral so we can maximize our grass production, then we may not need as much lime over here as we do over here. And so a lot of times those composite samples, what they'll allow us to do, or what they'll have us do, is we're over applying in certain places and then we're under applying in other places. And so what we really want to do is actually fix that pH in that specific zone. And so the more soil samples we can get, the closer to accurate as we can get in those. And you know, our inputs aren't cheap, and so a lot of times that actually saves us on especially lime applications. Because if we're just grabbing a composite soil sample, a lot of times we're over liming certain areas of the farm.
Yeah, and that's one of the things that we wanted to protect against here.
Absolutely.
Obviously, as the work that, you know, we're obviously the Nature Conservancy, and that's something that we don't want to do. And in partnership with doing the work with MFA and especially NRCS through the Conservation Innovation Grant is stacking all these pieces together in a systems approach. So we're looking at this upland landscape, the area of pasture here that the cows are grazing on. And you know, right as you go down over the hill in this vegetation, boom, then we're right into the main creek side. And there's a lot of species in there that are of great concern. Obviously the federally listed Topeka shiner, this is one of those locations, one of 2 where its home is here in Missouri. And you know, then we have Dunn Ranch on north of us that has a lot of key wildlife species and things like that in it. But I think as we look at stacking these things together, the one thing that we want to educate, you know, landowners and producers about is not just doing the same thing that you've always done, is looking at how you can do things different. Now, in that grid soil sampling, as you said, you know, there may be certain areas that, you know, we need to, you know, put some application on there to, you know, raise the pH up or whatever, but that's going to go for, you know, a lot of things as we look to produce the biomass that we want to out here for the grazing, you know, that's going to be acting like that sponge, allow, you know, deeper roots to set in some of this area. But, you know, there might be certain fertilizers that go on here at a heavier level than they have in the past, and that's what that soil test is going to do. It's taking the guesswork out of it, and it's going to point us in the direction that we need to go for our applications.
Absolutely. So a lot of times we'll be able to predict kind of past management from some of those soil samples, and so in the past maybe it wasn't so easy to get cows across the creek, so that was always hayed. Well, hay production is a completely different animal as far as nutrient removal from the soil than what grazing does. 75 to 80% of what goes in that cow comes right out the back end, right? So that's not the case with a hay bale. We're literally hauling it off site. So those kind of things.
Right up on the hill there, I know the test you showed me.
Right up on the hill, a lot of times you'll see like past concentrated livestock. So maybe we had a past enclosure with a lot of manure application right up there on top, and so a lot of times we don't need to do anything to those areas because they may be high or overly fertile already. So when we look at applications, we just want to make sure we're putting it in the right spot.
Yep, absolutely. And I know not just working with you here on this project, but we're working with MFA on some work with the 4R nutrient program as we look at row crop and pasture land. And one of the things that we want to paint the picture of is we're in a working landscape. This is a working ranch, and we're stacking all these pieces together. This is something, contacting MFA and having them come out and do some, grid soil sampling and things like that on their land, whether they've owned that ground for, 10 or 15 years and haven't done any testing on it, or perhaps they acquired a new farm and are starting at ground one. It's a great way of establishing that baseline so you're not just blowing money out the door. And it's all about, as we look at this sustainable grazing, in a particular operation like this, number one, it's got to be economically feasible, and taking those soil sampling and hiring an outfit like MFA to come out and do that and have that baseline information is that first step forward in making sure that you're being good stewards of your dollar, and that you could take that dollar you may have been investing in fertilizer and investing it in some fencing infrastructure, or something with a corral, as we've been able to do here in some of those instances.
Yeah, no, that you're absolutely right, Kent. That's where we want to get all of our customers to, is where we're being most efficient with our dollar and making sure we're getting the best production out of our grazing lands. And so you're exactly right, and it's just a natural order of things. Like I said, you guys acquired this piece, no history on it, things like that, and that's where we really want to make sure we grab that background information.
Yeah, and I know we hired you guys to also take a composite forage sample out here as well, and today I know we have a couple of different locations. There's one just over the hill, actually just down back there, just straight north of us right now. You see the little fenced in area, and that's our little control segment that we see what the vegetation ungrazed is going to be like out here. And directly outside of that, the Institute of Biological Training, they have a plot that's GPSed on the outside to see what the impact of grazing is in that location. However, we know as we start through this effort with through NRCS with the Conservation Innovation Grant, as we dissect, right now we have basically two pastures that are set up right now, and cows have direct access to the stream, and the water bodies right here, the ponds, those are going to be getting fenced out. The stream segments are all going to be getting fenced out and excluded from that, but also as we go dividing this pasture up into paddocks, we're going to have about 12 different paddocks up here, and we're going to start going from a cool season grass dominated state that you see right here where we're standing, to some of it's going to be a blend of cool and warm season grass, and some of it's going to be a full-blown prairie. So as we look to MFA, what's the biggest gain a producer can see by having a forage analysis done? Is it from the standpoint of just seeing what vegetation is there, or really what palatable vegetation you have there at certain times of year for those cows?
Honestly, I think a lot of times in ruminant production, like what cattle are, a lot of times what we're looking at is just making sure we're managing correctly for the species of forage that we have out there. So we may not see a big difference, even if there's a pH change from one side to another as far as the forage analysis goes. I mean, our relative feed value may be relatively the same. I mean, we're certainly going to see a difference in tonnage, obviously. Yep. But as far as the actual value of the forage, but what we can usually do is kind of predict during the life cycle of all these grasses, when are they the most beneficial from a forage quality perspective. So a lot of our cool season grasses like fescue and things like that, I mean, we can basically predict the life cycle of that grass, as we look at the quality of the forage and how you know, once it produces head and once it produces a seed, then our quality of that tonnage certainly goes down. And the same boat's true for the warm season grasses too. And so I think a lot of, if you want to incorporate, you know, forage quality into things, a lot of it could be just making sure we're utilizing all of those species at the correct time during their life cycle, during the grazing period.
I know, you know, we go down here to Bethany, and we're sitting here just outside of Eagleville, here at Little Creek Farm, and we go down quite a bit and receive some products as we need them here for the ranching operation through that MFA facility there in Bethany. I know you guys have offices scattered all across Missouri, and I think you guys go across Missouri borders as well with MFA. So what all does MFA do for ranchers that are out here that are, you know, say, hey, I'm interested in getting a soil test getting done. I'm interested in a forage analysis. I mean, perhaps they're just looking for somewhere that they can go buy an electric fence charger and some wire or something like that. You know, what do you guys have to offer in your location?
MFA Agri Services, based in Columbia, Missouri, but we have around 130 retail locations all over the state of Missouri, and then we're Ag Choice in southern Iowa and eastern Kansas, and actually a little bit into northern Arkansas down there as well. And so yeah, we are agronomy, feed, farm supply, all of those things mixed together, grain marketing as well. And kind of the unique part of that, that or at least I see from the livestock producer side of things, the unique part of that is that we have those feed folks who are really focused on, you know, ration and gains and things with the livestock, and we've got those folks in the same meetings and the same trainings as the agronomy people who are like, well, hey, how do we grow these plants better? And I think certainly a combination of those two principles is what really is so efficient for ranchers and livestock producers across our trade territory anyway. So I think that melding of all that expertise allows us to take a kind of a one-on-one approach with a lot of our folks. And so,
well, yeah. I know there's several folks that may be looking at this, and they might be thinking, well, the Nature Conservancy, they're interested in ranching and having cattle graze out on these prairie lands and some of that. You know, we are within a working landscape, and if you look around us here in the Grand River grassland and several parts of Missouri, it is ranching. Sure. And we want to make sure that those areas that are pasture land are maintained as pasture land. You know, you can see where just the other day we sprayed some multiflora rose that was growing up in here. You know, there's threats to this kind of lifestyle, the ranching lifestyle, from encroachment of woody species into these pastures, conversion of these pastures into row crop agriculture, you know, and perhaps being in some type of other vegetation, you know, say warm season grasses or even cool season grasses is the best state that they can be in. And you know, we're a landowner in this community, just like our neighbors around us that, you know, do ranching, and we want to make sure that we're utilizing this site and not just going in and saying, hey, we're just going to pull the cows off and we're going to do all the restoration efforts year one, and we're just going to keep everything off here for 3 years, and then we're going to come right in and we're going to be ready to go. We want to do it in a step-by-step process that those folks that are our neighbors or those folks tuning in can look at it and see, wow, I can do some of these things in a metered approach like that and get the direction I need to be, you know, for economic purposes, let alone the benefits for wildlife or water quality that we know we're going to see in some of this. So, you know, I know folks might be looking at the Nature Conservancy and the impacts there, but, you know, no different than how we use fire as a tool in the toolbox, and there's a lot of, you know, we do some high mowing and some of those areas. Grazing is the tool we utilize. Just across the road we use, you know, the bison to mimic that natural grazing regime on there, and then we have cattle on this particular site from Ryan Cox. And I know we had touched base upon the grid sampling that was here on 2.5 acre grids that was done. On average, what would a producer be looking like to find a cost value per acre that they if they were to hire you to come in and do those samplings like that? I know that here on this site we hired you to do that. We've hired you guys to do some spraying for us, some burn down in some areas that we're going to do some restoration on, but specifically on that grid soil sampling, you know, because that can apply to row crop, that can apply to the pasture lands that we exist in right now and are standing in. What does that roughly cost an acre for a producer?
Sure. So we're typically looking at less than $10 an acre. varies a little bit store to store, but generally less than $10 an acre across our trade territory covers that. And if you look at that cost, you can't buy very much product for less than $10 an acre. So it's a lot cheaper to pull that dirt and do the sample on it, and make sure we're doing things right moving forward. That way you make sure every dollar that you do invest in the actual product is going where it needs to go. And so what we've seen also along, I mentioned lime, super basic soil fertility thing, right? People have been talking about lime and soil since the 50s. So the reason I bring that up is because a lot of times just by sampling on a grid basis, we can actually cover that cost just in the lime savings of things, because just those composite soil samples, there's just invariably a lot of areas that we're putting way too much product on.
Well, I sure appreciate you coming out today, and if anyone's wanting to find out what MFA has to offer, I'm sure there's a website or something that they can go to. What's that website? Is it just MFA?
MFA-inc.com is our just general MFA Incorporated wide website. Most of the groups of the agri-services locations have their own website. Or if at MFA-inc.com is our email, so if anybody ever wants to get a hold of me personally, it's just conservation@MFA-inc.
Okay.
And those emails go directly to me. So yeah, that's the best way to get a hold of us.
Well, I appreciate the efforts of MFA, and know that we're working alongside not in just this operation right here, but also the 4R and some other things throughout Missouri, and definitely a great partnership as we move forward. And hopefully here before long we're going to start transforming this place, and we're going to have paddocks set up and different grasses in place, and start doing some more rotational grazing out here on site, and moving the needle forward for conservation, which is what we're all out here about doing.